Everyone. Welcome to a conversation about thinking about the pandemic and the current situation that we're in, and how we can apply our learning to the future, and how we can use what we're learning at this time to help us continue to move towards a transformed system, deeper learning and more deep learning opportunities for the young people in our education systems. To begin with, I'd like to recognize the fact that I am in Cowichan here. My name's Rod Allen, and I'm on Hulkaminam speaking territory, the unceded historical lands of the Hulkaminam people, and honored to be here. We are I'm very grateful to have some guests with me today. We have Jal Mehta, from Harvard Graduate School. We have David Jackson from the Innovation Unit in the UK. We have Shane Safir, author and educator, and Yong Zhao from University of Kansas, joining us today. And I'll have them introduce themselves shortly in a second. And we'll aim for probably about a 30-minute conversation here, and touch on some of our learnings in part one of this little series. So let's go in the same order, and I'm just going in the order that I have you on my screen. Jal, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Rod, and good to join you virtually in British Columbia, which I always find an inspiring example of what is possible in education. My name is Jal Mehta, professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I do work on deep learning at the classroom, school, and system level.
Thanks, Jal. David Jackson.
Thanks also for the invitation, Rod. The conversation is a bit of a metaphor about how education can open itself up, I guess. I am a senior associate at the Innovation Unit in the UK. Specialising in education and other aspects of children's social care. But I was previously head teacher of a community comprehensive. I was a director at the National College for School Leadership, and I have worked on system transformation and school reform programs internationally, including with New York's iZone.
Thanks, David, and special thanks for staying up late. This is a humane time for us in North America, and a little rougher for you in London, so in Great Britain. So we thank you for that. Shane.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening to David. Thank you so much, Rod, for inviting me to this panel. My name is Shane Safir, and I am really a practitioner at heart. I'm a former high school teacher and principal based in the Bay Area in Oakland, California. And I'm also an author, a writer of a book called The Listening Leader, and someone who does a lot of work around equity leadership development across the states and increasingly in BC. So like Jal, I'm really fascinated by just the level of innovation and creativity and what's happening in your province.
Thanks, Shane, and welcome. Yong Zhao, no stranger to British Columbia. Yong, who are you when you're not being famous?
Sorry about that. Yong Zhao from University of Kansas, and I've been doing a lot of work in BC, so I'm very excited about this opportunity to chat with everybody.
Thanks, Yong. And thanks to all of you for joining me. As I said, my name's Rod Allen. I'm a retired superintendent from British Columbia. Spent a while in the Ministry of Education, mid-career, and then found the need to go back to the field and spend some time in Cowichan and Prince George and Bulkley Valley and some amazing places around the province. And have been privileged to work with all of these fine people over the years, and thought it would be a great opportunity to have a joined up conversation about what we're learning. So first question for all of you. I'm wondering, as you look at and experience the situation over the last couple of months that we're going through with the pandemic, with schools, this closure of physical schools, the opening up of online learning opportunities for young folks, what are some of the things that you're thinking about? What are you seeing? What are you feeling and what are you thinking about? Yong, let's start with you, please.
Well, I think it takes a while to really understand what this is. In the beginning, we were only thinking about China. China was the case. So I think about the end of February, I was in Philadelphia speaking at NIS, the National Association of Independent Schools. We're just playing with the idea about if the virus gets going on for more than a year, forces schools to close for a year, what would be? That was a question I posed and I never expected really to happen. And I then after a while come back, and then that becomes the reality for many places. I think a big part for me to consider this is this is such a common global universal experience. What would students experience out of this? How can we make good use of the opportunity to help our children to understand the global interdependence and global interconnectedness? That's what really I've been thinking a lot about, because in the age of globalization, we have more or less really tried to use let's say PISA-defined standards or STEM or whatever that is to derive this. But I think there's a human connection. That piece is not being talked about. I'm hoping that this crisis can help us to bring some attention to the humanity of education.
Thanks, Yong. Shane, what's on your mind these days as you're thinking about the current situation?
Yeah, I think on a local level, I'm thinking a lot about the mental well-being of students and educators, and the sort of identity shift that's happening for a lot of educators right now as they try to find their way in this, kind of unforeseen moment. I'm thinking a lot as a parent and an educator about what it means for schools to authentically partner with parents who are essentially the primary educators in many or most homes right now. And then thinking a lot about student voice and agency. And, I think we can say students are agents of their own learning, but, our curriculum often doesn't reflect that. But we're in this moment where they have, sort of the ability to be creatively non-compliant, right, and resistant. And so we're seeing that, and having to step back from some of our usual kind of corralling methods and really listen to them about what they want and what they dream of in their schools.
Right. You can't make them. They can walk with their feet now more than they ever been able to before. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Shane. David.
It's just kind of an interesting question, actually, because I know what I think, but I haven't really thought about what I feel. And I feel, I think, a state of animated apprehension. Because I work in the field of innovation, and for the last 15 years, we have been working on programs trying to help schools to think transformatively about alternative paradigms of learning. And I'm obsessed by the notion that as I travel around the world and visit innovative environments, there are multiple models of schooling that can help all young people to be successful. The one model we know cannot do that is the existing model. It's had 100 years to demonstrate whether it could or couldn't, and it can't, and it won't. And so, there is a sort of groundswell of belief that there are alternative paradigms, different models, we can change ourselves, but the regressive forces of the school is so resistant to change, whether that be internal dynamics and organizational structures, or external accountabilities, or exam systems, or parental expectations. Our experience in working on innovation programs is, however ambitious schools initially are, they regress to the norm. And here we have the opportunity where all those constraints have been taken away. And there is the opportunity to learn from that. And here's where the apprehension lies, that there is no evidence that the schooling system itself is capable of that kind of transformational learning to reinvent itself. So that's what kind of this conversation is all about. Can there be an agency that helps us to see the possibilities in this as well as the kind of complexity and difficulty of this. So that's where I am.
Simple. I'm sure we can sort through that, David.
Yeah.
You're in an easy place.
That's our job.
Yeah. Jal Mehta, what's on your mind?
I'll just build on where David left off. I think it's interesting that, for the first time in my lifetime, the standardized tests, at least in the United States, have been removed. And yet, thus far, what schools have sent home look, very similar to what they were trying to do physically in school before school ended. And I don't blame anyone for that. No one asked for this, and it came on a moment's notice, and there was no time to prepare or think or rethink. But I think that it does show, to David's point, that it's not only the structures which are so constraining, but the mindsets. And that even with the structures removed, the way of thinking about what it means to do school remains. A book I was reading recently asked you to think about the difference between schooling as knowledge accumulation, which is 90% of the conversations we have about school, sort of what sort of knowledge are students accumulating and how fast and how is it distributed across groups and so on and so forth. And instead to ask, like, what sort of people are being produced by this institution? And so I think this is a really good opportunity to step back and think about those things. And to Shane's point about the partnership point, I really hope that parents who essentially have seen schooling lay bare, they see the packets, they see the online classes, they see the best parts of those, the places where teachers are inspiring and where students are passionate. They also see that their own youngsters, my kids, are reading more than they ever have before because they can't see their friends, they can't play sports, they only get a certain amount of time on screens, there's a lot of hours to fill. All of a sudden, like, books don't look so bad. And so I think, if parents are discovering certain capabilities of their students and they're discovering that the way that schools are engaging their students are often not drawing forth those capabilities, maybe they will put some pressure on schools to change.
Yeah, interesting. As parents are really seeing their children as learners and as students now in ways they haven't been able to see in before because they're witnessing it happening right in front of them. I'm reminded of a comment further to what you said, Jal, by Jeff Hopkins, a well-known educator here in BC, who said, all too often we huddle on the brown grass where the box has been, even after the box has been removed. We sort of like that. There's some certainty of huddling on the brown grass, and so right now we have a health situation that's removed the box, but are we prepared to, how courageous might we be? So thanks all for that. That you've touched on a whole variety of things. Let's maybe go to, and I know Yong, this is an area, a question you ask frequently, but I'll throw it out to all of you. This may expose, this current situation may expose that, and really force us to ask the question: are we focusing on the right things in education? Are we now, and have we been in the past? Each of you sort of touched on that a little bit in your answers, but I'm curious if we could go a bit deeper into: are we focusing on the right things in our learning systems now? Mm-hmm. Who wants to go first? Okay, Yong, fire it up.
Sure. Well, I think, there are several things to think about. What right now, I don't think any school system as a system is doing the right things right now. I think that's where I hear from a lot of people talking about, we're going through the process. There are schools who's trying to do right things. What are the right things to do? The right things to do, I think, for me, I think education is to produce people who will create different societies. You know, that's not only trying to follow what the societies have, but right now I think many times societies make schools to follow what it has, and that's one thing I think. Number two, I think also the people have to rethink about how to live together. I think right now all the school systems, the curriculum is a nationalistic system. It's trying to build a nation as if our nation is good, then we happen to be good with others. You know, the idea of called global competency is just as a side, so you can make some money off other people, you can do something. But I think that's just, we have to think ourselves as global citizens. And number three is that I think we are at a time, we're dealing with a super class of people, a super class of the inventors, the investors, all those people who are pushing the society to certain directions. And we either try to resist that, which we cannot, or we try to follow that, which we cannot either. I think then we just have this trouble, you know, it's going through. I think societies have to do a lot more, our schools, I mean, have to do a lot more to educate us as human beings, as people who would have to work together. This is a dream, by the way, I don't think can be realized, but this is what I think the right things schools should do.
Jal, or Yong, pardon me, in some of your writings, you talk about how human beings shouldn't try to compete with machines. Human beings should focus on the kinds of activities and learning that we're built for, and not try to sort of be a better calculator than a machine. Does that play into this somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, that's what's happening. I think there's no reason for us to try to be like, you know, try to get rid of machines. I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's wise for us to be more mechanical. I think we just have to be identify where we are, what's the best way of make good use of technology. It's going to change, and we will participate in shift in the future. I mean, the fourth industrial revolution is here. We cannot resist that. But where does it go? How is it going to benefit human beings or not? Depends on really new generation of people to how we're going to make sure it shifts. You know, it changes. You know, what can we do with it?
Thanks, Yong. Joe, what's your connection to this? What kinds of things has the system been focused on? You talked about, you know, content learning and so on, and what are we learning during this time that's helping us see the kinds of things that we should be far more focused on in our school systems?
I think one thing that should be apparent to schools at the moment is that students are not going to do every little thing that you would have had them do if they physically came to you. And so, given that, I think it would be a good moment to step back and think about what are the larger things that you really care about that students come away with. It seems like a good moment to do that. And I think a lot of parents right now are feeling pressure from schools to fill out, you know, have their kids go through all the things that the schools are asking them to do. And that's making people unhappy and making an already difficult situation a lot more stressful. And I think, you know, as parents, your job is to sort of think about in the long run, like, you know, who is this person who I love and what could they become and what kinds of capacities could they have? And I think we would all do well to keep that question firmly in mind. I think some of this can come sort of through the subjects. So I think it's sort of a false choice. Like, we couldn't have a world where you sort of went to class all day about like how to get along better with other human beings. You're better off, you know, doing a project which is trying to deliver something which has a real purpose, which has some value for some other human beings, and grapple with the difficulties that will create in being on a team, and so on and so forth. So I think there are ways to learn some of the big things that are important in some of the subject areas, while also pursuing these broader competencies which we're seeking. If I could add one more thing, I do think that this crisis has laid bare, at least in my country, all of the things that we haven't done well in the crisis are the things that we should be trying to foster in schools. So if we could understand science, if we could learn how to trust one another, if we could have empathy for other people, if we could care about the community as well as the individual, those are things that my country does not possess in sufficient quantity, and hence we're in a really bad pickle with a global crisis. And so those are the kinds of qualities that I'd love to see schools develop.
Shane, coming from the same country, maybe let's ask you and ask how that resonates with you.
It is a very painful time to be an American citizen, I will say. And I think I want to kind of revisit something Yong said about the importance of learning to live together as an international community. I think there's such possibility here around developing global empathy in young people, let alone adults, right? And yet it's a little bit of the box on the grass syndrome. I feel like we're still having class within the structure of class, within the structure of school. I mean, why are we not having students connect across borders? Why are we not having students connect across districts? Why are we not co-teaching left and right? We don't have to be a single teacher in a classroom right now. So I think there's this, what I call sometimes the incarceration of the imagination playing out, where we're just not seeing that all bets are off right now. We can actually play in a much larger sandbox. And part of that could be about leveraging this moment to cultivate cross-national, cross-cultural, global empathy and connection. So that feels like something to think about together. The other piece, thinking about BC and the competency-based curriculum, is just this moment around assessment where there's so much promise in my mind around performance-based assessment. So we started a school in 2003, right after No Child Left Behind had become law here in the States. And counterculturally, we created this performance-based assessment system where our seniors graduated by portfolio defense and our 10th graders had to do a rite of passage 10th to 11th grade at the end of junior institute, and a similar kind of public defensive learning. And, it feels like right now we could really be thinking, you all certainly are ahead of the curve with your curriculum that exists, about a robust system of performance-based assessment. We don't have our standard metrics right now, right? The standardized tests, as Jal said, have gone away. So what would it look like to have these performance assessments, not just as capstone projects, which I know a lot of folks in BC are working on, but at the end of every year, or at least at the end of every level, opportunities for young people to engage in self-directed inquiry and to really demonstrate, exhibit, defend their knowledge and their ideas, again, potentially in collaboration across geographies, across districts, across borders. So that feels like a place that we can start to focus attention on if we don't get stuck in the grass underneath the box, if you will.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, perspective from Great Britain.
You know what I think about this question, Rob? The subject-based curriculum feels to me to be a sort of medieval construct for organizing knowledge, that for some reason it has become resistant to change. What's really dangerous is that, certainly in the UK, most secondary teachers would see their professional knowledge as being their subject knowledge. And it isn't at all. The first time I connected with High Tech High, one of their design principles is teacher as designer. And I didn't immediately get it. And of course, it's incredibly profound, because that is what teachers are. They are designers of learning. That's the professional knowledge base. That's what we do, We design and facilitate great learning through relationships. And we bring our subject knowledge to the table in service of that. But we somehow or other, we've got into a paradigm of we are the deliverers of subject content, and we try to make that interesting and engaging. I mean, if you go down the other end, so that's the problem with schooling. If you go down the other end, when you talk to parents and ask them what they want for their kids from their schooling experience, we know what they want. They want the schooling experience to enhance their children's self-esteem. They want their kids to leave school with a love of learning. They want them to have friends and good relationships. They want their values to be good. They want them to be custodians and stewards of our environment, you know? And they want them to get good exam results. And somehow or other, we take that afterthought and we make it the only thing that matters, you know? So what I'm fascinated about, just to conclude, you know, if you ask a simple question of why do we have subject-based tests or exams on the same day for the whole year group, you know? If that's how driving tests worked, half the country would never drive. We have the opportunity to have a system where when we assess children, we're assessing them when they feel ready, when they produce great work that they're happy about. Instead, we put them all in an exam room so it will fail half of them. And the system is inhumane in that respect. You know, half of them will fail. And they'll spend the rest of their life with that image of themselves as school failures, you know, and it's kind of great. But all bets are off now, aren't they? All that's gone. We have the opportunity to look at it anew, which is really why this conversation is exciting, and all the possibilities of where it might travel are exciting.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think as we draw part one here to a close, any final comments on these ideas that we've been talking about the competency-based curriculum? We haven't really got into agency. I think we'll get into agency in part two. Any final thoughts here before we close part one? Okay, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Jal Mehta, Safir, Yong Zhao, and David Jackson for joining me in this conversation. We hope it's been useful, and please join us for part two.
Where we'll